Once upon a time, grown adults would venture across city, county, and state lines to visit liquor stores and locations they never would otherwise frequent, searching for old whiskeys that had never been purchased, out of production gems that were sitting on shelves collecting dust. I used to dusty hunt. This is part of the getup, the cheap sweatshirt, the stubble, maybe not always the hood pulled down over my head, but this is generally what I'd go into liquor stores dressed as, looking like I'm the kind of person who would wander into a liquor store at 10 o'clock in the morning. When you first start dusty hunting, you make the mistake of not wanting to leave without buying something, so you wind up buying a bunch of really crappy whiskey. I'm going to take a look at what I call a dirty dusty, something that I probably didn't want to buy in the first place and is in terrible shape, and we'll talk about it, and I'm going to taste it. Haig blended Scotch got its start in the 1800s and was the most popular Scotch brand in Britain for decades, starting right around World War II, right up through the 70s. In 1971, it became the first spirits brand in Britain to sell 1 million cases. Classically, Haig had a lot of Cameron Bridge grain whiskey in it, as well as quite a bit of lowland malt as well. So I am expecting this to be on the light side of things. Just because the bottle itself and the label looks dirty, that doesn't necessarily mean the whiskey inside the bottle is bad. You need to look for 3 characteristics to determine if it's any good, and you should take a look at these things before you buy the whiskey. First off, is the bottle sealed? Is its tax stamp intact? This one does not have an intact tax stamp at all. There's a little bit on the top, but it is totally gone from the surrounding areas, so one cannot guarantee that the whiskey is sealed. Secondly, you want to take a look at the fill level, where the top of the whiskey in the bottle sits. Usually it should be somewhere up here around the neck. This one's sitting here. It's not a great fill level. It's not a terrible one. Thirdly, you want to make sure that the whiskey is clear. And luckily this does have clear whiskey. If there is cloudiness to it, it's not necessarily due to a lack of chill filtration. There can be damage that's done with heat or sunlight that starts making the whiskey cloudy, and you should skip those bottles. If the booze inside looks cloudy, do not buy it, do not open it, do not drink it. Luckily, this is the one good aspect about this bottle, is that the whiskey is clear. One thing you are going to want to look for on the label is sun damage. If it looks like the ink has faded a lot over a short period of time, this has remarkable detail left in the ink, so I'm not concerned about sun damage with this one. Moldy and water spots can mean a couple of things. It could mean that it was in a flood of some sort or it had some water damage. That would be a problem, especially if the bottle is not sealed. If the bottle's all sealed up and you see some spots on it and stuff, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Basements, wine cellars, wine caves, even attics, they can get a little mold sometimes. And if it's just appearing on the label in a couple small spots, that isn't necessarily a death knell for the whiskey inside. So this, to me, is a dirty dusty because, not just because it's all crispy and dirty on the label or having a bunch of schmutz on the bottle, but because it has no seal left intact. I have no idea if somebody opened up the bottle and drank it and closed it and put it back on the shelf. That is entirely possible. The fill level isn't great either. The only good news is that the fill level isn't down to here and that the liquid is nice and clear. I probably should have left it on the shelf. I shouldn't have spent my money on it, but let's find out if that's the case. It's time to open up this unsealed bottle of Haig. That was much too easy. Put a few drops of water. So this is the neat glass of Haig. There's no water in it. It's in the Glencairn. I'd say a little bit of iodine in there, a bit of ocean notes. It has a little bit of engine oil, a bit of a mossy peat note. Considering how questionable the bottle is, the nose is good. The diluted version in the wide mouth glass has more of those industrial notes, like oil, like fabrics. Now I'm going to taste. It is sharp, this intense horseradish, like real bitter herb edge to it. Very impressive. It's also earthy and a little rooty. So at time, there's a little bit of smoke that's coming up. Cracked black pepper. There's definitely some sweetness to it, but the intensity of the greenery and the bitterness and the earthiness keep the sweetness at bay. Now I'm going to taste the diluted version in the open mouth glass. Even diluted a little bit, it still has a punch. It's still complex. With time, it has picked up notes of cotton, caramel, and cantaloupe. I don't know why they all have C's, but that's what it has. The finish is milder in the palate. It has a moderate length to it, but there's no sweetness left in the finish. It's all the earth and the greens and the bitterness that are left kind of floating around the tongue. So some final thoughts on this. Even at 43% and with 45 years in the bottle, the whiskey can take water. I've had two other Haigs from the 1970s. One was from another dusty bottle I had bought that was totally disgusting. The other was a Haig from the 1970s from Europe, and it was delicious. This falls in between. It doesn't have any off notes to it, which is very impressive considering the questionable quality of the bottle. I'm looking forward to trying this some more and enjoying it. So it was not a bad decision on my part to buy it. If you see any Haigs wherever you are, whether it is in a shop or an auction, make sure that it's sealed. Make sure it has a good fill level. Make sure the whiskey is clear, because you may actually have a decent tasting whiskey on your hands. The quality is there when you want to open it up and enjoy it. This really was a nice surprise.
Papa.
Sounds like my time is up.